The first review of October 2020 is Necrovision, a title that could be confused for the name of a death metal band. I mean, it would be badass. Next up, the newest single from Necrovision. Okay, let's move on to the game. Necrovision has an interesting premise. You play as a soldier in a world war where there's an alternate timeline. The Nazis are experimenting with dark powers, and as such, another conflict is brought to our world. The war between vampires and other demons. You get to find a gauntlet-like artifact that turns you into an unstoppable undead killing machine, and using the game's Necrovision, hence the title, you aim to dethrone the attacking forces because apparently the vampires aren't bad. Instead, they exist solely to prevent these demons from invading the world, which just happened. Well, crap. At the start of the game, it feels like a simple war game. Move around, complete objectives, shoot Germans dead. You know, things that a million other games have done since the advent of wartime FPS games. Sure, there's a bit of gore and dismemberment, plus a strange story that feels disjointed, but it's still a solid game. But once you kill the evil scientist that is actively trying to corrupt the world and gain the powers that be, things take a bit of a turn. You take up his gauntlet, find out you're now undead and can throw fireballs, and learn that now you're on the vampire's team. Honestly, from here, the story gets pretty weird and confusing. Why are the Germans trying to destroy our world? Why are the vampires helping the human race? Why do I need this stupid gauntlet? Why does this game feel like Painkiller? Well, to be fair, the answer to the last question I know. The game uses the Painkiller engine, which is pretty obvious right from the start. If you haven't played Painkiller, I highly recommend it. It's on my to-do list. But anyway, back to Necrovision. You'll be playing the game not because of the story, but more to see what kind of crazy crap you'll run into next. One mission you'll be evading deadly poison gas and shooting any troops that try to sneak up on you. The next, a gargantuan beast might start chasing you through the ruins of a town as you try to find enough dynamite to blow open a wall to escape. And even later, you drop all Nazi premises and just defeat the army trying to defeat the vampires. It's all nonsensical and won't win any awards for amazing storylines in video games. Personally, I feel like the game would have overall been better if it had stayed entirely with the earthly war mixed with hell on earth instead of changing gears completely and spending all of your time underground in the vampire's lair. Instead, you play a few missions in the regular war setting with normal era weapons, such as a Karst rifle, shotgun, and 1911 pistol. But then after you learn that you're now the Shadow Master, you start getting a very limited selection of vampire weaponry, such as an SMG, flamethrower, a shotgun, and a rocket launcher. You might think, well, Reaper, why not just use the overworld weapons, yet if those are still more fun? Well, I would, but ammo pretty much disappears once you enter the land of vampires. You only find stocks of ammunition for your newly found weaponry, and many of them feel underpowered. The SMG is actually kind of nice, but feels a bit weak. The shotgun seems lacking in oomph, as it usually takes a good 2 or 3 blasts at close range to take down the weakest of thugs. The flamethrower? Yeah, it sucks. And the rocket launcher isn't awful when it comes to power, but it's so slow that enemies will be right in front of you after the first blast, rendering any subsequent firing damaging to yourself as well. It also doesn't help that a lot of the enemies are bullet sponges, so any ammo caches that you may find may be depleted within minutes before you can obtain another one, but thankfully, there's another weapon you can use with limitless reserves, the Gauntlet. When you obtain it, you'll learn that it does have a ranged attack, which uses Fury to power, and a bladed melee hit that kills much quicker than many of the projectile weapons you can find. In fact, I spent more time hacking and slashing the undead army away to nothing than I did shooting them full of holes. Plus, doing so will net you Fury to be able to fire some shots. So what is Fury? Well, you may have noticed that as you're attacking, the screen will blur and a phrase will appear. These are known as special kill combos, and by doing these, you'll see the bar near your health start to increase. This is known as Fury, which has a few uses. One is to allow you to utilize slow motion to survive some harrowing situations. Another is to utilize the Gauntlet to fire things that can't be sliced and diced. At first, you only have a large fireball, which is really all you need to take down most groups. You can also find some other abilities, though. One is to fire a small dart. Another will freeze an opponent to slow it down. You can complete some optional challenge rooms that unlock after every stage to earn new abilities, but I personally never figured out how to perform them, so I really can't talk about them much. Maybe it's because I don't have enough max fury. You can increase the max by finding more vampire artifacts, otherwise known as looking around and finding some out-of-place secret areas. The other reason to use fury goes hand in hand with the slow motion. As you take lethal damage, the game will immediately utilize what you have stocked up to slow down the action so you can escape to recoup. It's a nice touch, but it sucks if you were saving it for something else and it's involuntarily taken from you. Although, come to think of it, if you're gonna die, what does it even matter if the game uses it for you? The game's pace can be summed up easily. Chaotic. At times, enemies may fail to stop respawning until you reach a certain spot of the level. Explosions will rock your surroundings, areas are massive and offer little cover, and the beasts will hone in on your position. With this, it's easy to get spun around, and in some of the levels that feature repetitive environments, it's easy to lose your bearings. There is no marker to show where you're supposed to go, so if you get lost, you'll just have to muddle through the anarchy of battle. It doesn't help that the game's difficulty feels unbalanced. At first, the game is fairly easy, with minimal demons hunting you down. There are iron sights for the human weapons, but it's not often recommended to use them, as enemies move too erratically to really aim properly. So until I got a sniper scope, I didn't really bother too often with the rifle's sight. But again, once you get into the underworld, things get crazy. The worst part is the final stage before the ultimate boss, in which enemies will constantly bombard you in a form of a gauntlet. In order to show more footage, I couldn't help but activate God mode to progress further. I don't recall if I ever finished the game the first time without cheats, but if I did, I have no freaking clue how. I've died time after time after time, and gave up attempting. Can it be done? Of course, but I didn't have the patience and wanted to move on to recording the next game anyway. I will say that there's a nice change of pace in the stage where you have to fly around riding a dragon. Thankfully, it only happens in one stage because it drags out for far too long. You just move around, spitting fire at approaching enemies, and occasionally hop off to open a gate. Here's what I want to know. If it only takes a small dozen of SMG bullets to kill a gargoyle, yet it takes a few seconds of Dragon's Flame, how powerful is this dragon? I'm thinking it wants to check its diet and see why its fire is lukewarm. At least the game isn't terribly long, otherwise it would feel like it had overstayed its welcome. It's completable in probably close to 10 hours, maybe less if you don't bother attempting the challenge rooms for the rewards they give. Hint, it's not really worth it. It would have been a bit quicker if there were objective markers, but you'll just have to forgive the game for not holding your hand. Actually, it's kind of refreshing to be honest. The graphics of the game look pretty good. At least, they do in Overworld. It's your typical blurry, war-torn zone, complete with wrecked ruins, bloody trenches, and hills ripe with ambushes. The only problem is the visuals like to get blurry when there's a lot of action. Performing those kill moves slows everything down by a second, and things blur on the sides of the screens. There's lots of bloom everywhere, which is a graphical detail I cannot stand. Am I the only person to turn off bloom anytime I start up a new game? But anywho, once you get to the underworld, things are bland, fiery metal landscapes. Let's face it, you're shooting around in a form of hell. Demonic creatures fly down from massively open rooms. It just feels boring in comparison, which is saying a lot if you think the war-torn grays of Earth are more exciting. Necrovision isn't a bad game, but the first part of it is definitely better than the second. What starts off as an interesting take on a war zone turns into a romp through some mundane areas. The whole vampires being humans' unsung heroes is a neat premise, but I feel not enough was done with this story, as it devolves into your typical humans versus Satan fare, and it completely forgoes the vampire lore. I personally think that if more time was spent above ground exploring the Nazis' fascination with hellish powers, the game would have been more enjoyable, but as it stands, the current plot route drags the game down and makes the fun factor steadily decrease after the shadow powers are introduced. Play this one if you can find it on a sale, but don't expect a super exciting time. Final score? 4 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.